Hello everyone and welcome to the Gunpla Network. I'm the Spicer, and today's review of the GM Command Space Type is brought to you by none other than those fine folks over at Canadian Gundam. Canadian Gundam is your one-stop shop for all things Plamo and Gunpla here in North America. With a private warehouse option, flat rate shipping to the US and Canada, and a vast catalog that's restocked regularly, they're going to have just about anything you're looking for. So when you're checking that vast catalog and placing your next order, don't forget to use the promo code Gunpla Network to save yourself 10% off. Now, this, as I kind of surmised in the unboxing, is pretty similar to that of its brethren in the Cold Districts type. There are some minor changes, largely with the backpack, the head, and the back skirt, but outside of that, the rest of the body's kind of the same. And that's not a horrible thing. I mean, yeah, it is a fairly old, it's pretty old, and it is limited in some manners, but overall it's really not that bad. If you're a big Fetty collector, big GM, or kind of GM adjacent style collector, this is going to be something that's going to fit right into the rest of your shelf. Now, visually speaking, this is a coloration that I think is a good upgrade from the regular GM. You do have a little bit more going on in terms of its overall sculpt, being pretty much everything above the legs, and it works. The GM is a good base to work off of, and, well, generally speaking, if you make it a little bit more complex, it fits still well within it. And you can make 100 different variations that people are generally going to like if they like the base version. So as far as the GM command goes, of course, the body is going to be different than the regular GM. It's the same body from at least what I understand of the GM Cold Districts type, or at least feels very similar to it and looks like it, because we'll see that later in the video. The head is different than the Cold Districts type and the regular GM. It does have its antenna put down into the torso, so I guess the torso is slightly different for this from Cold Districts type. The shoulders are very similar between those two at least, but it does have the thruster on the very end of the shoulder, so it is going to be upgraded that way as opposed to the regular GM. And then of course its forearm is going to have a bigger extension for kind of an elbow shielding, if you will. But outside of that, that's kind of the rest of the arm. Down towards the waist skirts, this version, you do have the beam skirts kind of in a Nemo fashion, if I remember correctly, on the back of the side skirt, or back of the back skirt. Maybe I'm thinking of the Yakushiki, but there's a lot of Zeta suits that do this, if I remember correctly. But unfortunately, this is one of those older suits, so you don't get beam saber blades. But the one benefit this is going to have to just about anything else from its era, it pegs into a peg, the hilt does. So you can probably, with a little bit of patience and a hand drill, make those work with a regular beam saber blade from something else. So that's actually a pretty neat, unique feature of this kit, I guess. You also have its backpack being different, which has thrusters kind of all over the place, one of the each four corners and two on the very back. It's pretty cool looking. This is very much a functional backpack, kind of a Leo, Space Leo kind of thing, even though it looks nothing like the Space Leo backpack. I don't know why it gives me those vibes, it just does. And then down towards the legs, it's kind of all the same. There's not a lot to write home about there, I'm not going to lie. Now, once you get into the accessories, like I said, you're going to get that toothpick beam saber that's all molded in the same plastic, so you do have to paint that. But if you do decide to use the beam saber hilts, you can absolutely go ahead and do so. You're going to have to use a little bit of care, a hand drill, be very, very careful to maybe get that to work, and maybe you're going to have to do a little working on the back skirt to make sure they plug back in. But if you don't decide to do that, this is what you're left with. It's serviceable. It's something you're going to expect from a kit of this era. But it is nice that you have the option to go another route if you so choose. You do have a decent amount of posability here. Now, obviously, it's an older kit, so you're not going to have like a bunch of ab crunch. In reality, you don't really have any. And the front skirts are going to be the one big bar for the most part. So separating them is possible, but a little bit more difficult than some more newer kits. And outside of that, you're kind of done in terms of weird things to consider with the articulation. The knees move well, the ankles move well, the arms, well, they're not too crazy as far as like a double joint or anything. They are very serviceable, and the shoulders work pretty well. The head is a little limited by the color on the torso and the red piece on the chin, but generally you're going to be able to move the head in a lot of ways you would want to. Now, you do get, as we saw earlier, a cool shield. This is one of my favorite shields generally in Gundam. It is a little different than that of the GM Custom that would come in Stardust Memory, as it has kind of those two handles on either side. It's not just one big uniform piece like the GM Customs is. And I kind of like this, honestly. I kind of like having those little cutouts. They're not very functional, but I think it adds a little bit more flair to it. But I do like the big curved shield. It is two pieces of plastic with a PC joint and a handle plugged into it. So it's not going to really astonish you. You have a little bit of painting work if you want to, but generally, I like the shape. That's it. You do get the beam spray gun, which I am happy to say is a significantly better mold than that of the Cold District GM machine gun. It is much, much more stable, and it works. I haven't had any issues with it just falling out. I haven't had any issues with it weight-wise because it's very light. And I do like the kind of longer, extended look of this. It's like kind of a weird in-between of like a beam pistol and a beam rifle. Now, if you do decide to put this up against something like the GM Cold District type, you're going to see a lot of those similarities. And like I said, the torso outside of the, I guess, commander antenna or just the radio antenna, whatever you want to call it, the antenna is on the torso versus the head. But outside of that, they're pretty similar. Of course, the beam sabers on the back skirt is also going to be a thing unique to the GM custom or GM command type, the space command type. So there's a lot of different versions of this. There's also the colony one, which I think we've reviewed already. That's very similar to these as well. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, if you have a lot of GMs, this is something, if you don't already have, is probably on your radar, and for relatively good reason. It's not going to blow you away in terms of its posing, its accessories, but it is essentially a GM. Like, it is a GM, but it's like, it checks all the boxes of GM you would want. And it's going to match pretty much every other GM you have on your shelf. So if you do kind of want the Super Sentai Eevee Pokemon evolution of the GMs, this is going to be on your list. But that begs the question, is this something that anyone else is going to like? I mean, it's old, it's not flashy, and I would say if you don't have the strong desire to build grunt suits or collect grunt suits, you're not a GM person, this is probably a skip. Like, it's not bad, it's a fun, quick little build, it looks pretty good right out of box with not a lot of work, but if you don't have the positive association to the GM mentally, it's just going to be a thing you put on your shelf, and then maybe you decide, I need space, I'm going to put something else there. And that's unfortunately where it's fallen for me. As much as I do like GMs and collect a lot of Fetty-based mobile suits, in terms of what I have for the UC, it's cool, and it's going to be something I'll pull out for reviews here and there if I review other GMs, but it's not something that I like over the GM Custom, or even like the GM Quell, or the Roselle, or any kind of those iterations of that. Yeah, I mean, it's good. And if you have a bunch of space for Fetties and GMs, it's great. But anyone else, I think you're all right with this. This is, like I said, gonna not be on my shelf. Like right now, it is in a box for whenever I need to pull it out for review. So those are kind of my thoughts. If you've built this, you have this on your shelf, you've collected this, whatever, let me know in the comments down below what you think about it. Was it a fun build? Is it a little too limited? Have you used it in some kind of custom? Have you put other weapons with it, like you see right here with the Call District machine gun, which this also does not hold great, so this is confirmed the machine gun's problem. And, yeah, just let me know what you think about it. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me, guys. I really do appreciate it. As always, do your best to stay safe and keep on building.